Chapter 8. Arilla ran with Phoenix, Spring, and Simba. She loved the light-hearted moments with the different species she encountered, especially their young. The other symbiots and dragonlings had separated as they ran to play in different parts of the wonderful world that had been created. She climbed up the steps onto the wiggling bridge that led to a house of some type. Both dragonlings climbed with confidence, showing they knew exactly where they were going. Giggles filled the air as she stepped through the door. Mirrors of all shapes and sizes lined the room. Arilla paused as she saw her own reflection in one. Phoenix and Spring came to stand next to her. She was tall and skinny, while Phoenix was short and wide. Spring had a tiny head and a huge body. Arilla scooted over until she was standing next to Phoenix. Her shape changed as she did. "This reminds me of the feathered birds from your mother's world," Arilla chuckled, as she flapped her wings and bobbed her head. "I believe they are called chickens." Phoenix shifted until she was in her two-legged form. "Chicken," she repeated, flapping her arms up and down. "Chicken!" Arilla giggled as Spring moved to another mirror that made her look like she was upside down. The small dragon fell over and rolled onto her back as she tried to see herself. This was fun, and there was no way that Ekaterina could get upset about her and Arosa being here. Shifting to her natural form of flowing gold, she held her hand out to Spring, who was now in her two-legged form as well. "Show me more," Arilla chuckled in delight. Creon paused as he wiped a combination of damp cobwebs and sweat from his face. He glanced behind him. He had toasted a few of the golden creatures with the glowing eyes before he realized that they were mechanical. He grimaced at the faint smell of burnt electrical wiring that clung to the air. He'd lost sight of Keelan and Vox in the dark forest. They had separated when they thought they heard Balent and Rome's squeals coming from the right. Creon was heading toward where he had last seen Phoenix and Spring. The only reason he wasn't panicking was because he knew that Harvey was with them. He had jogged over the uneven ground, trying to keep his direction while avoiding the trees when he rounded one and ran into one of the thick webs. The more he tried to escape, the more tangled he had become. He had finally shifted into his dragon form, hoping to slice through it with his claws. What he had not expected were for the dozen small eight-legged creatures to come pouring out at him. He had reacted instinctively, and before he knew it, had set the whole damn thing on fire. Pausing, he wiped his hand down along his side when he saw Harvey lying contentedly outside the funny-looking house that was at least 3 stories high and half as wide. "I thought you were with them," he growled, as he stepped past the slumbering symbiote. Harvey sent a strange image of what looked like a golden phoenix to him, before lowering its head back to the ground. Creon shook his head and stepped up onto the wiggling bridge. Holding onto the mesh of woven chain, he crossed over it and into the house. Carmen shook her head as she watched Creon let out a long stream of fire. Luckily, dragonfire burned hot, precise, and so intense that it quickly extinguished itself once he quit blowing it. She followed him at a safe distance, waiting for the perfect opportunity to sneak up on him. She bit her lip when she heard him admonish Harvey for not following the twins inside the funhouse. The girls loved going into it. This entrance led to the bottom-floor hall of mirrors. There were 6 ways in and out of the building, although 3 of those were hidden for the most part. Carmen moved to one side of the entrances that was a double door for moving things in and out. She slipped in the side. There were lots of corners and spaces to hide in. "This time I'll be the one to follow and catch him sneaking around," she thought with a grin, as she narrowed in on where the girls were giggling. Fox froze as he turned in a circle. Sweat broke out on his brow again as he listened. The hair on the back of his cat's neck was standing straight up. This was the place where those damn beasts had been. His eyes darted back and forth as he tried to see where Keelan had gone. A light, cool fog floated along the floor of the forest. cavern, he muttered. It isn't a real forest. It is just a created one. He hissed and jumped when a firm hand gripped his shoulder. Turning, he gripped the forearm connected to the hand on his shoulder. He almost threw the body attached to the arm before he realized it was just Keelan. A low snarl escaped him. "I'm with you," Keelan reminded him, looking at where Vox was still gripping his arm. "Can you pull the claws in? They're a little painful." "Sorry," Vox muttered as he released Keelan. "Just don't sneak up on me. My cat is about ready to go crazy. It knows those beasts are in here." "Wolves," Keelan replied in an absent-minded voice. "It took me a little while to remember what they are called. Paul showed me some when I was on his world. They are like Harvey, only wild and meaner." "I don't give a damn what they are called," Vox muttered as he scanned the darkness and fog. A slight giggle and movement to his left had him and Keelan turning at the same time. "Rome? Come here, son." A low hiss echoed before the tip of a tiny tail flickered above the fog before it disappeared again. The sound of scurrying feet and more giggles sounded, this time to their right. "Balint, come to Daddy," Keelan called out. "Daddy!" a happy voice echoed. "Play tag with Mama!" Keelan released a relieved sigh as he walked toward the sound. He stopped with a frown when the spot where Balint had been turned out to be empty. He twirled as the faint sound of giggles moved beneath him. "I think they are going under us," Keelan told Vox as the big Seraphim cat shifter backed up to where he was standing. Keelan knelt on one knee and tapped the ground. A giggle escaped under where he had tapped. "Vox!" "They are coming," Vox growled. "You find the kids and protect them. I will take care of this." "Vox, I don't—" Keelan started to argue as he stood up, but Vox had already shifted and was padding away from him on silent feet. "I don't think this is what we think it is," he finished, with a shake of his head. Keelan's eyes scanned the area. The dark shadow near the base of a nearby tree kept pulling at him. Striding over to it, he knelt again and shifted enough so that he could see better in the darkness. A black cloth covered a hole at the bottom of the tree. Pulling it back, a grin spread across his face as he saw the rope lighting running the length of a tunnel. That was how the kids kept moving around so damn fast. Sitting down, he pushed his legs through the opening. A choked gasp escaped him when he found himself sliding further down along a long, wide tube. He laughed as he twisted and turned. No wonder the kids were having so much fun, he thought as he spun around so he was sliding on his belly. It is a maze of tunnels built just for them. Keelan's laughter echoed as he landed in a pit of large, round, colorful balls. He lay on his back, staring up at the sky through the center of one of the hollow trees. Little lights danced like the fireflies he had seen back on Earth. This was Trisha's doing, he thought, as he saw the reflected image of a full moon. A slender hand touched his, and he turned his head to stare into his mate's beautiful eyes. A smile danced around her lips as he stared up at her in surprise, then in desire. She knew he was trying to figure out why she was dressed so funny. "It would appear I found me a lost boy," she murmured as she sank down beside him. "Balint?" Keelan asked in a husky voice. "Playing with Rome in the bubble room. Bio is watching them. Riley is going to get Vox," she whispered, as he drew her down over the top of him. "I hope she takes her time," Keelan murmured, as he captured her lips. Riley adjusted the sheet so she could see better, smoothing it down so that the eye holes were even. She had to hand it to Emma. For someone who was so shy and reserved, she really knew how to make a ghost costume that was sexy as hell. Riley glanced down at the thigh-high pink faux fur and rhinestone high-heeled boots. The sheet only went as far as her upper thighs and sparkled like it was covered in 1,000,000 diamonds. Even the eye holes were framed with tiny jewels. "Damn, but I look good," she whispered with a grin. The fact that all she had on under the sheet was a pair of matching pink lace panties and bra didn't hurt her self-esteem either. She definitely had never had a ghost costume like this before. Pearl would have had a heart attack if she'd tried to leave their small apartment in this getup. She carefully opened the door in the tree and stepped out. Shutting it firmly behind her, she rounded the tree just in time to hear a loud snarl and see a flash of fur several yards ahead of her. Biting her lip to keep from giggling, she strode through the makeshift forest, amazed at how real life it looked. The theme parks would be eating their hearts out for something like this, she thought, as she peeked around another tree. Vox was turning in a tight circle, sniffing the air. A low rumble escaped him, sending a shiver of desire through Riley. She rolled her eyes behind the sheet. The warm heat that pooled wasn't coming from her cat. It was 100% her reacting to Vox's sexy growl. Riley decided that if she wanted to get back to bed before daylight, she'd better push her wayward pheromones back under control. Raising her arms up, she stepped out from behind the tree and started making ghost sounds. What she didn't realize was that at the same time as she stepped out from behind the tree, the program running the ghostly wolf pack restarted. 3 of the huge creatures suddenly appeared in front of her. The light from the hologram caught on the rhinestones, causing them to flash with twinkling brilliance. Riley knew she was in trouble the moment Vox turned. If she thought his hair was standing up before, it was nothing compared to what it was doing now. It looked like he had just come out of a commercial dryer filled with static electricity. Dropping her arms to her side, she stood looking at him for a fraction of a second before deciding retreat was probably a good idea. She turned at the same time as he emitted an ear-shattering roar of rage. Reaching for the tree as she tripped over one of the roots, she fell onto the soft ground material with her ass up in the air. A low cry escaped her when she felt Vox's hot breath against her ass. Covering her head, she waited to feel his sharp teeth and claws rip into her flesh. Instead, warm hands ran up over the curve of her buttocks. "Riley," Vox choked out. Rolling onto her back, she peeked up at him through the sheet. A soft moan escaped her when his hands followed her roll and ended up at the top of her thighs. Licking her lips, she looked into his stunned eyes. "Hi, Tiger," she whispered in a husky voice. Vox froze every few steps, waiting and listening for the beasts to appear again. He had caught a brief glimpse of them, but they had disappeared when he got close. It was driving him crazy that he couldn't smell them. He didn't know what wolves were supposed to smell like, but he was sure they had some kind of scent. He paused in the center of a small group of trees and lifted his head. Drawing in several deep breaths, he could detect a trace of Balint and Rome. Turning slightly, he also caught another one. Riley had been here. His head jerked around when the soft sound of moaning reached him. A loud roar escaped him when he saw a figure materialized from between the trees along with 3 of the wolves. Rage washed through him at the threat, and he charged the wolves and the figure. The first wolf reached him as the twinkling figure turned. He swiped his paw at it and stumbled when it went through it. He whipped around as the second came at him. This time, a shiver ran through him as it passed right through his body. Determined to get at least one of the beasts that night, he decided to go after the one that had turned. Rushing forward, he saw the figure stumble and fall. The moment the beautiful rounded ass was uncovered, he knew exactly who it was. No other living being had a more desirable, gorgeous ass than his mate. The hot breath of his cat fanned her ass before he shifted. Reaching out, he ran his hands over the familiar flesh of his mate. A low rumble escaped him when she moaned as he turned her. "Oh, yes," he thought, as he reacted to her scent and he called out her name. "This is definitely my mate." "Hi, Tiger," she whispered. Bright blue eyes peeked up at him from behind the bedsheet. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips when he saw the color and the bling, as she liked to call it. He gently pulled the bottom of the sheet up so he could see her face. His breath grew heavier the further it went as he saw how little she was wearing underneath it. By the time he had it over her head, both he and his cat were panting. "Why are you wearing a pink bedsheet?" he asked, in a strained voice as he climbed over her so he could cage her with his body when she shivered. "What are you doing here?" "I'm a ghost," she replied as she stared up at him. "I was trying to scare you, but when you turned, I thought you were going to rip me apart." A husky laugh escaped Vox. "I was chasing the wolves until I realized they were just holograms. They were very real-looking ones, but they are harmless." His voice faded when she reached up and began playing with the short hair at his nape. She turned her head, looking around the dark forest area. Except for a few hologram wolves that occasionally passed through, they were practically alone. "Rome is playing with Balint in the bubble room," Riley commented in a quiet voice, as her other hand began rubbing his chest. "Bio was babysitting them with strict instructions not to let them out until one of us come for them." A sly smile lit Vox's face as he popped the front clasp on her bra as he slid his own hand between them. A louder rumble escaped him as the double hand-sized mounds spilled out. He brushed the tip of her right breast with the calloused pad of his thumb. "Playtime," he murmured as he claimed her lips.